Hey Mini enthusiasts, how you doing? Welcome back. I hope you're all well and I hope you're having a great day. So we're back on the Racing Green and it's time for a bit of an unboxing. So I took advantage of the Black Friday deals last week and decided to pick up some extra bits for the Mini. So let's get the blade out, let's cut it open and let's see what we bought. So first up we have a flitch panel repair section, Magnum panels. I've used these before actually, they're absolutely fine. That had a problem with them, which is why I'm using them again. And we have the other side as well because I know I'm going to have to do both of them. We have a jacking point repair section. I think this is actually, I can't remember whether it's a heritage one or not, but it's extended at the top here. It's made as a replacement part, and that this top bit here is extended further up. I'm not quite sure why. I think it just gives you more to weld to. Pair of steering rack boots. Another pair of steering rack boots. I didn't mean to order two sets. Oh well, always going to need them, haven't we? Got some shear bolts for the steering column. We have, I think this is a pot joint. I think I bought a pair of pot joints. Yes, it is. Pair of pot joints. I also bought a pair of front Timken bearings just because they were on offer. They were a good price. I think they're 40 quid. I don't actually know that it needs wheel bearings on the front. I don't think it does, but obviously we'll be doing swivels. We'll be stripping apart those whole front hub assemblies, so I might as well just put bearings in while I'm there. No messing around. There's the other jacking point. And then we have floor pans. So I've bought both sides. This is obviously the side we're working on at the moment, and maybe later on in this video we'll start getting this in. Now I don't actually know that I need both sides, but again, while I was there I thought I might as well just order them. There'll be another Mini to use them on, won't there? Engine mounts, track rod end, another track rod end, steering column, bracket, shear bolt. Other engine mount, and then some small bits and bobs here, drive shaft circlips, and the gaskets for the clutch, slave, clutch and brake master cylinders. And I think, not quite it, I've got a gasket for the steering rack, between the steering rack and the body. then that is just about it. So that lot come to 300 quid. Just over 300 quid, I think. Yeah, right, let's get into sorting this floor pan out. Right, so just as a recap, there is the repair we've done on the toe board. It's not completely finished yet. I still need to do a little bit of tidying up. However, to sort of finish it, actually I need to get the floor pan in now. This profile round here follows the profile round the corner of the pressing in the floor there. Now this repair section, there's the part number there, MS25R. I think it's a Heritage panel, not a Heritage, sorry, a Magnum panel. It's actually much bigger than you need. If I kind of put that in place, you'll see it extends right down to underneath the cross member here, and obviously has the inner seal section on it as well. The pressing for these channels is a pretty good match for that, so I'm quite pleased with that. I've seen some of them where they're just an awful match, and it might be just different marks of Mini, etc. So how far are we going to cut out? Now this bit is one of these jobs that I've just, you know, there's a lot of metal to cut out here, and I've kind of been putting it off. I'm just going to have to get on with it now. As far as how far do I need to cut, obviously all this part of the floor is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. This top corner is rotten as a peach, and then we've got this outer sill here, which comes back to about, oh sorry, the inner sill comes back to about there. This has been patched before and is holed, and it's holed up the front there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right back to here with the floor pan. All of this doesn't need replacing, but if I sort of chop along here, then up there, and it's all zigzag, and it's probably quicker just to cut the whole lot out, and there's probably, arguably, there'll be less welding to do if I just go there and there rather than zigzagging it. I need to give a little bit of thought up the front here, so I'll probably need to unpick this bit because I need to retain the toe board up around the corner here. So we'll probably switch to a bit of time lapse now. I'll get the grinder out, we'll cut this out. I've got it braced here. We've got it in the jig at the front. Always nervous cutting out this amount of metal, but there's no subframe, there's no weight on this shell or anything at the moment. So in theory, nothing should move. If it does, doesn't it? Sure it won't. We'll find out in a few months' time when the doors don't go back on. But anyway, let me just get on with it.
Hey Mini enthusiasts, how are you doing? Welcome back. I hope you're all well and I hope you're having a great day. I thought I'd add a bit of narration just to break up the time lapse a little bit. So this little section down the bottom here is a part of the toe board which I didn't think I was going to have to replace. Obviously, as I've mentioned in previous videos, what makes repairing a car really difficult is where it's had lots of poor repairs in the past and there's layers upon layers of different welded patches. You kind of have to chop it away. Bit of archaeology or carchaeology as it could be called, and try and find what's original. So the plan there was actually to get back to the original toe board and see if it needed repairing, but I took a bit of time drilling out the spot welds, and then when I got down to the bottom layer, that was corroded as well. So as you'd have seen there, I've just had to cut that sort of triangular section out the toe board, and I'm going to have to make a repair section to go in there as well, which is not ideal because ideally I'd have made it out the original repair section which I put on the toe board, but I thought that bit was okay. So, good old bit of cardboard aided design here. It's always useful when you're doing repairs like this just to use a bit of cardboard. You can put it underneath and use it as a template to mark out a piece of metal for the repair section. So if you're wondering, for the repair sections I'm using, it's 0.8 millimeters mild steel Zintek coated. The Zintek coating obviously stops it corroding. It's in fact really good at stopping the metal corroding. However, you do need to just clean back and linish the edges of where you're welding, because the smoke off the Zintek where it burns is not good for your health. And I showed the weld through primer there because on the lip between the toe board and the inner wing where it meets up against it, I'd forgot to put some weld through primer there, so I've just weld through primered between the two layers, and that will just obviously protect the metal. I'm sure I've said it lots of times before, but you'll see me going around and really making sure the two metal surfaces are clean when you're welding. That's probably my biggest tip when it comes to welding two bits of metal together. Half the battle is having clean metal to weld to. If you're trying to weld to corroded or partly corroded metal, you'll have all sorts of problems, and if there's any contamination on the metal, paint, seam sealer, oil, anything like that, it will really mess up the weld and just make it difficult. So it's worth spending a little bit of time really cleaning up the edges, really making sure you haven't got any contamination on the metal before you weld it. And like these panels here, so that repair section for the floor there is all Zintek coated, so where it's being welded you need to go along and clean off. I usually just use a flat disc just to go round and take off a very light skim sort of top surface of the metal where the Zintek coating is before I weld it. Otherwise it does give off lots of nasty smoke and affects the weld.
Yes, I seem to have found my mojo. Let's get this welded in.
So now we come to welding in that floor pan. Obviously it's a big piece of metal and there's quite a long length of metal to be welded. Now you'll see me originally, what I do with big panels like this, I will just tack it in place, just kind of every few inches, and then when it comes to doing the main continuous seam weld, I'll only do up to about 2 inches of seam weld in one place at a time. I'll then move to the next point, sort of furthest away or further away. The reason for that is just heat distortion. So where you weld, obviously it gets very hot, and if you just continue to weld a long strip of weld on a sheet panel like that, it just distorts all over the place. So I tend to sort of weld 2 inches and move away, weld another 2 inches, and then go back and do it in stages like that, and that tends to work for me. It also helps to have a bit of a gap between the 2 panels you're welding to. Now you'd think you want it an exact fit, but actually you probably want about 1/2 mil gap, because the metal expands when you weld it, and if you have it too close it can actually cause the metal to buckle a little bit. So I never use them. Mark's got some actually, but there's a little tool you can use called intergrips, which go between the 2 panels and hold them together, and that sort of gives you that perfect 1/2 mil gap. I've always managed to do without them. I'll have to order some up at some stage. And if you were wondering, I get asked lots of time, so all the welding I've done on this car, on Project Sprout previously, on Project Bruce I've done, is all done with a Clark 135 TE welder. It's a gas welder. I would not recommend using gasless. It's a relatively inexpensive welder, 135 amps, and obviously it uses an inert gas for the welding. The gas I use is an Argo mix, which I think is 80-20, and I use them on mini mig bottles, but high pressure mini mig bottles, so I think they're about 200 bar. They're not quite as cost effective as buying a big bottle, but they are a lot more, or a lot better value than buying kind of the traditional mini mig bottles you buy from places like Halfords. As far as the welding wire goes, it is 0.6mm mild steel, and I find 0.6mm good for welding thin body panels like this. Obviously the next size up is 0.8. I just find that a little bit harder to control. You need a few more amps to get it to weld, and obviously a few more amps means there's more chance of blowing holes in things. So I find 0.6mm very, very good for this type of welding. And as I say, I use Argo mix as a gas, and settings on a welder will vary, but just to give you some idea, so for this sort of welding here on the Clark 135 TE, I use it on setting number 1 maximum, and the wire speed is around about 6 to 6.5. I'm very pleased with the Clark 135 TE. The only downside is when you're welding thick metal, sort of 3mm and above, obviously it lacks the ampage to be able to get decent penetration.
Right, that's it. I think I found my mojo again. I'm super pleased with getting that done. It was just a horrible job to do, and I've just put it off and put it off and put it off. But I've been on it today, probably 4 hours or so, and I've got it done. So that's brilliant. I'm really, really pleased. So now that's done, I can turn my attention to putting the outer seal back on, the jacking point. It just makes me feel so much better. I've just put some primer on there because the next step will be to seam seal up around the edges, but I'm not going to seam seal until the rest of the welding's done because the stuff catches fire, and it's actually a bit of a pain. But I've just linished the welds back. I'm super pleased how the channels have lined up. They are pretty much perfect. I had to do very, very little fettling. So it was a panel from Mini Spares, MS25R, and I would imagine it's MS25L for the left hand side, but for a 1989 Mini like this, it is absolutely spot on. Really, really pleased. So that's obviously the toe board repair in place. We've got the strengthening panel for the steering rack. We've got a front floor pan in. All the inner seal is repaired now, just the outer seal to go on. I've just started cleaning up the underside. I've not actually So I don't actually bother linishing the welds on the underside because it just adds a bit of strength. But as you can see, that's welded from the inside of the car, and you can see the weld all the way through, you know, pretty much 50% of the weld sticking out the other side, which just shows you've got good penetration. I just need to do maybe a little bit more cleaning up round to the front here. Obviously the sort of jig is in the way, but no, I'm really pleased. I guess the only downside, the only bad bit I've noticed is now I've had a good look at the other side. That other side is going to want exactly the same as that. It's just as bad. It's obviously our big chunk of floor pan. They never look that bad from the inside, but when you look at this, there's 3 layers of metal there. When you look underneath, you can just see the various patches that have been welded on it in the past, how thin the metal is on that inner sill. So, good job done. I think you can tell by the smile on my face, I'm just really pleased to get that done. The pace on this has been a lot slower than the other minis I've done. I didn't intend to do this one quickly. I did think to myself, you know, I've had too many years of doing these restorations in sort of 6 to 9 months. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this at the pace that I'll enjoy doing it. There's still a lot to do, but we've made a good start. So catch you in the next one. Remember, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe, all that great stuff. And thanks to all the supporters of the channel out there. I'll catch you again soon.